Hey, everybody, welcome. We're live on the Jim Masters Show Live. So good to have everybody here. And you can see on the screen our fantastic guests. Dade Hayes is coming to us live from New York, and Dawn Chmielewski is coming to us from Los Angeles, California. They are journalists and co-authors of this incredible book, Binge Times. We've been talking about this actually the last couple of days as we've been previewing it here on the Jim Masters Show Live. Good to see you and you and you. And thanks for joining us. This is our entertainment lifestyle variety talk show series that we started 700 plus episodes ago, 2 years ago. And it is extraordinary the amount of guests that we have had coming through lately. We just want to remind you of some of them because it's been extraordinary. Lucy Arnez was here just a couple of days ago, and it was wonderful. Tony Orlando stopped by the show. John Davidson was here visiting us as well. And that's just a few. So check those episodes out. There's 700 plus episodes that you can binge watch as well here on the Jim Masters Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Variety Talk Show series, where we're bringing back the lost art of conversation with our famous light, love, and levity, or as you guys call it, lovity. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us out big time. Also, our JMS live chat room is open and available right now. That is exclusive for subscribers. There's no cost when you click that red subscribe button. That is free to you, but it allows you to chat amongst yourselves, which a lot of you like to do in our private JMS live chat room. And also we can see your comments as well. And maybe we'll throw some of them up on the screen, which we always like to do once in a while. So we appreciate you doing that. And if you enjoy this episode and any of the ones you enjoy, don't forget to give us that good old thumbs up. You'll see a thumb icon actually on the YouTube channel. Click like, thumbs up, and leave a comment for us as well. We really appreciate that. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for tuning in from all around the world. Thanks for all the great comments, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, private messages, emails. You guys are really on fire. And thanks for spreading the word continually about our series. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about this incredible book. We're so excited to have Dade and Dawn here. Dade is actually a business editor with Deadline Hollywood, too. And they're both brilliant journalists, co-authors of this fantastic book. I want to talk about it. It's really incredible. William Morrow actually proud to publish Binge Times, inside Hollywood's furious billion-dollar battle to take down Netflix. Yeah, the book just came out in April, written by the two journalists with decades of experience reporting on entertainment and technology. This book is the first comprehensive account of the biggest wake-up call in the history of the entertainment business. Yeah, the pivot to streaming. Streaming services have become the main source of entertainment, a shift accelerated by the pandemic and the stay-at-home mindset. And with Netflix and Amazon established as leaders, the legacy companies such as Disney and NBC and WarnerMedia, well, they have been trying to catch up. And other tech companies such as Apple and others have come to the table as well. Binge Times provides inside access into this battle and captures all the drama and high stakes of the moment. It's a deep dive into the disparate group of media and tech companies as they scramble to mount multi-billion-dollar challenges to Netflix. The story takes us behind the scenes from Silicon Valley to Hollywood to Wall Street, and a mesmerizing tale of hubris, ambition, and the future of home entertainment, and so much more, where failure is not an option, offering a front row seat to an inflection point in home entertainment. The authors conducted exclusive interviews with dozens of people at all the major companies at the heart of this story, from Disney to Apple to Netflix. We'll talk about it more throughout this broadcast. It really is an incredible book. It's also available, just to let you know, on Audible. And there is the book right there. And it is available and it is riveting. Now, we are here streaming right now. And I was, trained in broadcast media. I'm a television guy, a radio guy, stage and film. University, college. I've worked for a multitude of television stations, network, radio stations over the years, on air, behind the scenes. So I've understood even myself how the streaming world has sort of come into play along with television and radio still existing and all the other platforms that are out there. So we've sort of merged the two worlds together with this show. When we launched this in April of 2020, some 700 episodes later. So sort of playing off my TV and radio broadcast background and creating this streaming sort of platform done as a television show, but on the internet. So this is a fascinating topic for me as well, being, of a broadcast training, mindset, and seeing what's happening, in the landscape. You might find this fascinating as well. Matter of fact, I see a lot of comments already built up. So you know how it is here. We always have poignant conversations. We have really cool guests. And matter of fact, why don't we put our hands together and welcome them here? One from New York, one from LA. We got it all covered here. Here's Dawn, and here is Dade. Hey,
Thanks
gang, how are you? Oh, it's a pleasure.
Glad to be with you.
Yeah, pleasure to have you here. I find it fascinating. As I said, I come from a broadcast background myself. So I have seen firsthand, with stations and with networks, and I work with public television. I mean, I've seen it all, how they've had to sort of adapt and be flexible and morph and sort of, some have tried to play catch up, but try to make sure that they are connected and they are staying relevant. I remember working for a radio station once. It was actually an iHeart station, where when they first had their website, we couldn't mention the website on the air, because if we mentioned the website, it took people away from listening to the station and they would be entertained by the website. But then when they learned that you can actually sell advertising on the website, we couldn't say the website on the air enough. So an interesting perspective. Welcome to both of you. Before we talk about the book, and I could start with you, Dade, tell us about your individual backgrounds, journalistically as well, and then we'll talk about how the two of you linked up to prepare this book. Start with you, Dade.
Thank you so much again for having us, Jim.
My pleasure.
And I really do relate to your story. I mean, Dawn and I probably both do in our own travels, because we come out of more of a print background, print and digital. But, mostly I've written for newspapers and magazines, and that same phenomenon that you described in the radio business was definitely well in evidence in print journalism. The web team sort of worked down the hall or maybe on a different floor, and they were just, for so many years, tragically, like well into the 2000s, like basically more time than it should have persisted. There was this kind of perception of it being kind of this other business that was lesser than the mothership of print. And of course, we know how that story ended. But, I've written for a couple of different publications in my time: Variety, Entertainment Weekly, been an editor at a few others, and really specialized primarily in entertainment. This is the third book I've had published. All of them are kind of in the media and entertainment zone. And I was very privileged to work with Dawn for about a year at Deadline, and that's kind of the seedbed of this book idea. So over to you, Dawn.
So Dade and I traveled a very similar path.
He said that like a broadcaster, didn't he? Over to you, Dawn.
Oh yeah, I know.
That was perfect.
we have been trained in the dark arts of broadcasting. I like Dade, I've worked at several major dailies, including the Los Angeles Times, for a good number of years. I have engaged in and dropped into digital publishing. Left the world of traditional media and went to join the folks at Recode, which is now part of the Vox Media digital media publishing group, and decided to take a leisurely tour through the world of magazine publishing at Forbes before joining the staff at Reuters, global news organization that I'm very pleased to be associated with. And Dade and I did a year stint together at Deadline and hatched what began as a book about the history of HBO and evolved over the course of our reporting and writing to be more focused on Netflix and how it had entirely disrupted the world of television.
It really has, absolutely, on many different levels, because it was something brand new. You know, it was something sort of uh, foreign in the beginning. People trying to understand it, what's it about. There's a monthly subscription. I mean, they're used to doing that with cable TV and other subscriptions, but this was something really dedicated to entertainment and movies, and then starting to get into creating some of their own stuff. And then here comes, you know, Apple TV and Paramount and all the rest now getting into streaming as well. They sort of really got the ball rolling, sort of launching it. Interesting that, you know, in the news, for anybody that's watching that hasn't been following the news, the drop in subscriptions, 200,000 or something they've lost recently. What do you attribute to that? Is it the economy, the inflation, people pulling back on, you know, expendable things, or is it people getting tired of it, or what do you guys deduce from that?
Well,
Go
I
ahead,
can
Dade.
start, Dawn, and then we'll kind of
That sounds
tag
fine.
team on this. But they articulated a few reasons at Netflix for the slippage in subscribers, which was really a major event because, you know, they had not reported a decline in subscribers in more than a decade. So it was a big deal in April when they did report that, and they talked about everything from supply chain. If you think about it, you know, the Netflix app is embedded in a number of devices, smart TVs, et cetera. And if those are stuck on a container ship and they're not being delivered, you know, that's a net loss. So fine, give them that. But then the more serious issues were really a bit of a dip in programming. Kind of the most compelling programming just wasn't there. They hadn't gotten to, you know, the new season of Stranger Things. They've got a pretty formidable lineup of feature films, but a lot of those are coming toward the second half of the year. And so they just sort of had a lull as a company. And then there were a few other factors. Dawn may kind of fill in the rest, but they just sort of found this sort of soft spot underfoot. You know, they had been projecting. The reason it was a big miss and it caused such a huge uproar is that they were expecting a gain of about 2 million in that range. And the fact that they not only didn't gain, but they lost was a big deal. And then they're also saying in the current quarter, which will be up at the end of June, they could lose another 1.5 million subscriptions. So that's really why people have started to get so shaky about Netflix.
And I guess they, with the pandemic and all, production, the studios, everything was all sort of closed and shut down. So they really couldn't produce a lot, right? So that's sort of, now that has caught up.
Well, I think it was I agree with everything that Dade has said, but but what was singular about this moment is that Netflix for the first time acknowledged the competitive threat of all of these other streaming services as competing for subscribers. That was one of the factors that it attributed to the losses that it reported for the first time in more than a decade. So this is what I found to be most arresting about what Netflix reported.
If I could just tag on one thing to that, what was so interesting and actually kind of, in a sense, like darkly amusing for a couple of years, as everybody was, you know, putting their chips on the table and saying, all right, we're Disney, we're coming for you. You know, we're HBO, we're coming for you. I mean, one company after the next was basically like aiming their, you know, heavy artillery at Netflix. And Netflix was asked about this. Hey, what do you think about the competition? Aren't you getting a little worried? And it was literally like they would not even acknowledge that another company was out there. I mean, Reed Hastings, the co-founder and co-CEO of Netflix, famously said that the biggest competition Netflix faces is sleep. Now, this was a few years ago, not the current moment, but what is kind of radical about where they are today is that they are finally acknowledging, you know, saying the name, sort of like Harry Potter and Voldemort. You know, they're sort of speaking the names of competitors out loud, which is sort of a wildly different stance than they took before.
That's amazing. So when you guys really wanted to dig in deep and sort of take a look at this, do a little investigative work and bring it all to light, When did that happen? What was the inspiration for it? When did you guys decide to pair up, to collaborate, and write the book?
So Dave, it was your Genesis story.
Yeah,
So
I
you
mean,
start.
I had been sort of noodling on this. Like I said, I had had the pleasure of writing 2 previous books before, and so I kind of understood what the ingredients needed to be. I felt very bonded with Dawn, and what was sort of interesting is that from both, from both coasts, we were writing multiple times a day about this very phenomenon. We were trying to surround the explosion of news around streaming and the change that was going on. And so, I'd kind of been noodling on this HBO idea. Interestingly, as a side note, there are 2 major books, one already published, one coming out soon, both very focused just on HBO. So I'm kind of glad that we didn't, go into that lane, and we got some very good advice about, hey, the picture is much bigger. But so we kind of started, I'd say 2018 was when the seeds were kind of planted. And then we first part of 2019, we finally had a publisher and we were off and running. So, that's the timeline.
Was there any resistance? Was there anybody within the industry that didn't want to talk, didn't want to discuss it? I would imagine, on either side of the situation, there were a few who were like, oh no, I don't, bye, I'm leaving,
So that's fun. That's fun. It became clear early into our reporting that the Walt Disney Company had created a successful competitor to Netflix. The Walt Disney Company launched Disney Plus in November of 2019, and it quickly surpassed the company's own expectations and forecasts for growth. It like Netflix in sort of the early days of the pandemic benefited both from our desire to be entertained and diverted from kind of the gathering gloom, but also it had the strength of its core entertainment brands, which really brought in fan communities. If Star Wars fans subscribed, those fans of Pixar's animation subscribed, those who love to inhabit the Marvel Cinematic Universe came, and that made for a really powerful and focused offering. And as a consequence, Disney was happy to tell its story, which was one of sort of early success. By contrast, companies like Apple, which are famously secretive about sharing the inner workings of the company, in part because of Silicon Valley culture and this reluctance to speak too much in advance of your plans, because that will cause customers to sort of hold off in making purchases. It's a really interesting phenomenon in the Valley. So they're sort of culturally. They tend to withhold as a culture. They find that this gives them the advantage of marketing. When they launch a product, there's sort of a surge of interest, and it's all focused around the launch of a product. So Apple was not an avid participant in this, although we found other ways to tell their story.
Indeed. And I would just add on to that. I mean, Dawn had spent so long covering the tech industry before she kind of broadened out and did a lot of entertainment in LA. And so she had great sources. I benefited from that. The book, I think, really benefits from that. And, in the case of Disney, because they were in such a bunker in the pandemic, and even their business partners weren't getting their calls returned by Disney. I mean, they were really in like super secret mode. But a lot of people left, and we were able to catch up with them. And a lot of people, have projects there, and you find your way around the gatekeepers. And there's a kind of an old saw in I think journalism and certainly with books, where if it's an official version, it may not be the best version. To get everybody cooperating, it doesn't not always necessarily yield the most objective, compelling narrative. And that's really what we were out to tell, is like a narrative. I mean, this story, there's many components. We flash back in history, we project forward in time and imagine what the future might be. But at its heart, it's really like this sprint to get these 5 services up on their feet and launched, and what happened in that race in 2019 and 2020.
I know that among the many insights and ideas explored in the book is this scramble for streaming prompting mergers and acquisitions within, the industry as well. Tell us about some of that.
Yeah, Dawn.
It became clear, look, the executives in the industry could see sort of the winds sort of changing. They need to look no further than YouTube, the platform we're on now, to see that consumers were embracing streaming. And so Netflix was the first to recognize this sort of shift in consumer behavior and to capitalize on it. First by streaming other people's content, by streaming movies from Marvel, by streaming so top entertainment, top movies and television shows, Friends, The Office. It was all located on Netflix, and Netflix grew in its market cap by billions. But by 2017, it was clear that the traditional means of distributing entertainment in the home, TV, was beginning to lose subscribers by the millions, and that was finally cutting into the very lucrative business that all these media companies had built around the television ecosystem, which generated both advertising revenue and pardon me, carriage fees. So the fees that cable companies pay to begin to carry network programming. So we could see the winds changing, and that created a fresh urgency to these media companies that had been happy to cash Netflix checks up until that point.
I could see, it's easy to see why you would get choked up talking about television sort of going in a different direction, because that's how I have felt.
Excuse me just for a moment here.
Yeah. That makes total sense. If you work in these industries, it's more of a use-or, because I've done some newspaper work too, but you were, in the thick of print, and then, print had to deal with radio and then television, and now they're all dealing with the streaming. It's really fascinating, all these mergers and acquisitions and all the different things that have happened. And it was already starting to happen, but then when the pandemic, YouTube goes crazy if you say that, when that came, all of a sudden everybody's home. Here we are. You couldn't go to the movie theater, a lot of things, fairs and festivals, just stuff was not happening. Broadway was shut down, all of this. And now people were home and looking for things to do in addition to baking the sourdough bread and, finishing what they needed to finish. And that really became dominant, So this situation the last 2-3 years has sort of taken something that was already the ball that was already rolling in that forward direction and really accelerated it tenfold, huh?
For sure. I mean, in the case of Netflix, which has been the leading service for years, they got into the pandemic year of 2020, and in just those first 2 quarters, so the first half of 2020, they added 26 million subscribers, which is equivalent to the entire amount for all of 2019. So to your point, Jim, I mean, it just accelerated everything. And in the movie business, there was such tension around day and date and around even contracting the window. The window means how long a movie stays in a theater before it goes to streaming. And they were fighting like cats and dogs, the theaters and the studios, or Netflix and these newer companies. Netflix had a lot of conversations with exhibitors about The Irishman, Marriage Story. Your audience may remember that was a big year for them in 2019, and they wanted to open those movies as wide as they could, but the bigger circuits, AMC, Cinemark, and others, wouldn't take it because it had this taint of being a streaming film. But the quality level gets better and better. Anyway, the point being, everything that we knew before, it was starting to become a little fractious and tense between these business partners, and it just blew everything open. And they suddenly felt, I think the companies, the studios and the networks felt more emboldened to just sort of go for it. I just don't think they had as much hesitation because they really were trying to save their businesses. I think in a lot of the cases that we looked at, certainly Disney, imagine all the theme parks shut down, sports. I mean, their world like collapsed
completely.
Inward,
Yeah.
But the other companies as well.
Yeah, and also we saw WarnerMedia being opportunistic about this moment. So Warner Brothers, the film studio, had long wanted to reduce this incredibly long delay between a film's theatrical run, the time when we could see it in the movies and the time when a movie was available in the homes. The theater owners had aggressively resisted sort of moving movies swiftly from the big screen to the small screen, and locked out sort of this 90-day period of exclusivity. So studios found that they had to incur the expense of promoting a film to lure us off of our couches and get to the theater, and then promoting it once again to remind us that we did want to go see that movie but didn't quite make it to the theaters. So the marketing expense was enormous, but the consequences for the studios was equally great. The studios that dared to try to accelerate the release timing would find their films not being shown. So during the pandemic, that threat, the threat of being blackballed or left out of the theaters, was no longer relevant because the theaters were all closed. So Warner Brothers had this low risk opportunity to begin experimenting around release windows, and it began with Wonder Woman 1984, a movie that was timed for Christmas release. It was available in theaters, but it was also available on the same day on its streaming service, HBO Max, and that drew millions of people to this streaming service, which had been sputtering to take off. It was the last of the major streaming services to launch, at least during our coverage period. And it was just slowly gathering momentum. And Warner Brothers, under then CEO Jason Kilar, decided, let us move our entire theatrical slate to the streaming service. And it really did give the service ignition during a time when production was all but frozen in Hollywood. There was nothing fresh to see on HBO Max, or very few things. Planned launch shows like the Friends reunion, which we watched a year or two after it had been the anticipated release, weren't available. So this was a way to reinvigorate the service with fresh content and experiment with closing the windows. And it actually did, I think, help propel the service forward at a time when when production in Hollywood had all but ended.
Yeah.
Mm. You mentioned the movie business. I've seen some theaters shuttered during the pandemic and not reopened as a result of just the loss of revenue and, I guess, consolidation and the different things we're talking about here. Do you think theaters will survive? Will traditional release windows ever come back? There is something like, for example, I think actually I was just saying this the other day. We were talking about, I forgot where I was. It was in a TV shoot or something. We were talking about streaming and television and movies and all of it, live stage. And I said, gee, would I have wanted to watch the Poseidon Adventure on my computer screen, my phone, or my TV, or in the big theater with the surround sound and Sensurround and all of that? I think I would want to see it in the theater just because of the feeling of it and just the scope. And also there is something communal about it where when everybody's watching the Titanic sink, everybody in that theater, for at least, no matter what's going on, how crazy things are in the world, at least humanity is one, and we're all feeling the same thing at the same time. And we're all together feeling it at the same time. And there's something beautiful about that. Are we going to eventually lose some of that as we go more towards the streaming as the emphasis of a lot of things? I know there's some people that have been worried about some of that, the experience of humanity together sort of slipping away.
I'll jump in, and then Dawn, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Dawn and I talk a lot about this. But Jim, I'm afraid you're probably onto something. There is some truth to what you just said about some aspect of the communal experience kind of ebbing away. And I don't just mean theatrical movies. I just mean the fire hose that it has been running in terms of overall streaming content is not going to slow down. It's not like the powers that be are saying, all right, we've made enough shows. Now they are committed to new. They're desperate for new content to hook people and get them to sign up. that's movies, that's television. So I'm afraid we're sort of headed ever toward a fragmented landscape. However, on the other side of the coin, I would just point to some interesting recent developments in theatrical. And in fact, Dawn was highlighting some of the risks that, not risks, some of the decisions that WarnerMedia made in 2020, and 2021, in light of the theater closures. So Disney very opportunistically as well devised this method of release called Premier Access, which was really optimized for a time when theaters were mostly closed. They couldn't get things open. And so they would charge even subscribers of Disney Plus an additional $30 for movies like Mulan, Black Widow, and a couple of others. It hasn't been used really for the past year. They've kind of put it into they've sort of suspended it, I suppose, for the time being. And what has happened is you have this kind of wind at the back of many, many films. One case in point is that Encanto was the big Christmas release on Disney Plus, but it came into that having grossed almost $300 million in theaters since Thanksgiving. So there are these shorter windows. Doctor Strange 2 is another one. It played almost, it made almost $800 million around the world, which is quite a lot. It's still grossing. And yet it's going to shift to Disney Plus after about 37 days in theaters later this month. So you have this contraction of the window that is underway. It doesn't necessarily mean the death of the experience that you're describing. And we all have them, just these kind of signature seminal moments in understanding culture, understanding really society. I am not eager to brush past those or to kind of get to a place where those don't matter. I think the business of Hollywood is all about the bottom line. But I think they're seeing, look, Spider-Man, Jurassic Park, a lot of big theatrical movies are delivering the goods. We're in this uncertain period with the specialty releases and it's remarkable that Coda, for example, which won Best Picture, grossed peanuts in theaters. It came out day and date. It was on streaming on Apple TV Plus the same day that you could go see it in theaters. And I don't know about you, but I've yet to encounter anybody who saw it. Maybe a few people at the Sundance Film Festival when it first showed on the big screen.
There have
ironically,
been
that was a great example of a kind of film like you're talking about, where it's really designed to get a galvanized community, get people together in the same room, and yet it came out in a very pragmatic, like unemotional route. And but they did succeed in breaking through and winning an Oscar. So
I mean, the popcorn is a lot cheaper at home.
But
I mean,
I will say,
what, $3?
Right.
Yeah, I think
I discounted for my kids. I don't know.
And with these prices today, with inflation, I mean, God,
but that's real. But I think that I don't think I would have enjoyed Top Gun in the same way in my home as I did on a widescreen theater. I mean, so much of the movie is about spectacle and about aerial these exhilarating aerial scenes. And I think that we as humans like to be with one another, especially after 2 years of being confined. So I think that exhibition will come back slowly because there's still some people who are fearful about getting sick. And I think we'll see what the winter holds if we have yet another surge of some other variant of COVID. But I think that we crave the human experience. That's why interestingly, Live Nation and live concerts are thriving again. I think that we want that communal experience. So I don't think that the movie going experience is going to end. It may change. There may not be as many screens as there are currently. There's over 40,000 around the country. Maybe there'll be fewer at the end of this, but I think that people will still continue to go to movies.
And there have been a few that they've purposely released or re-released, epic classic movies that they've re-released specifically just in the movie theaters, so you can have that experience. Or maybe younger generations who didn't see it when it came out, whether it's The Wizard of Oz or whatever it is, those types of movies at just the movie theater for that experience. That's been an interesting thing I've seen theaters doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's they and they do non-movie programming.
Right.
People packing a theater to watch a video game competition or the Metropolitan Opera or all kinds of things. So they're very avidly pursuing those. I know IMAX in particular likes to talk about the Kanye West concert that they live streamed, and it was very successful. So theaters may alter their purpose to some degree, but I think the movie going experience is still pretty strong. I mean, I would also tag on to this. My first book was about the movie business, written some years ago before streaming, I have to say.
What was it called? We'll look for it.
It's called Open Wide, how Hollywood box office. I can't remember the subtitle.
Shall I look it up for you?
Changed the national conversation or something like that. But it was all about inside how movies are test marketed, exhibited, how the explosion of we all remember going to these 30 screen megaplexes. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a phenomenon that kind of has come back to earth a little bit since I wrote the book. But I think it is fair to say that Dawn and I were very interested in kind of let me just say the word, like the arrogance, I think, of the industry for so long. It was very reminiscent of record companies insisting on a $20 sticker price for CDs.
Yes.
Well into the digital era.
Remember that.
And what are people going to do? Like, it's kind of like with streaming, insisting on a 90-day window when, everybody, we live in a more flexible world. We're just not living our lives like that. Like, the Olympic Games are live and you're reading about them on social media, and then the NBC is still insisting on pretending like the results are brand new. So I think there's a consumer, the consumer is going to lead the way on a lot of this. And I do think, I spent a lot of time with movie exhibitors some time ago and for that book and the studio execs. And there was always this kind of Hatfield McCoy thing. They could never reach an agreement. And if you look at where they are now, they really better innovate, or it's going to be, I think they've got to really come up with some new models. And there are signs that they're on the verge of doing that.
I think one of the things that grew out of the $20 CD era was things like Napster and all the rest of that.
That's right.
As a result of the not wanting to pay $20, $25 for a CD. So each streaming service really has sort of its own unique approach, right? Maybe you can break that out for our viewers, probably just thinking, okay, everybody does everything the same way. We pay the subscription and it's all the same thing, but they're all doing it differently and coming at it from different angles and different ways, right?
Sure. I mean, I could start and I'll talk about a few and then Dade, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think that what we've seen in this era is the entry of technology companies. Amazon has been playing in the world of streaming for quite some time. In fact, its streaming service launched around the same time as Netflix launched its streaming service in 2007. So they've both been streaming video for quite some time. Amazon's ambitions with creating a streaming service is its ambitions are dramatically different from those from its rivals like Netflix or some of the movie studios. Its goal is to create an attractive lure that brings people into its Amazon Prime subscription service, which also includes the delivery of packages. In fact, we learned through the course of reporting this book that Amazon often will move into new markets and lead with its entertainment offering with Amazon Prime Video, and then build warehouses after that. So it's a tool for building awareness and for building, attracting subscribers, and then it could add on its lucrative delivery business. So Amazon's motivations are very different from a traditional studio. So too for Apple with its Apple TV Plus service, which sees itself as sort of a digital version of HBO. It doesn't have a deep catalog. It didn't go out and buy a movie studio so that we could watch, 100 years of film after we were watching the new stuff. It handpicks bespoke content that speaks to its brand. It sees itself as being this premium consumer brand. And so it is attracted to big movie stars, expensive projects that are consistent with how Apple sees itself in the world. And it actually has had some early success. Some of its first, practically swept the Emmy comedy category with Ted Lasso. Its story about the sort of fish out of water tale with an American football coach coaching a soccer league in UK. And then as Dade mentioned, it was the first streaming service to win an Academy Award for Best Picture with Coda, which my friends did watch. Dade, sorry. But anyhow, its objectives are different. Apple is looking to both retain and keep people within its ecosystem of devices by offering this service, and also begin to expose its subscribers to adjacent services. Once they're through watching Apple's content, and which feeds its very lucrative subscription business, Apple will also be happy to sell you subscriptions to other people's service, and it keeps a portion of that revenue as well. So for Apple, it's about building a very complicated business. It's both hardware and services. Dade, I'll let you take the next tranche.
Yeah. So then the new class is HBO Max, Peacock, Disney Plus. They're each a little different. Peacock is very reliant on advertising. They do have a premium subscription tier. They're actually spending a lot more money and giving it more attention these days at NBCUniversal. But the premise of Peacock initially was, hey, we're one of the biggest sellers of advertising. We're selling about 10 billion in advertising each year. And why not just hitch our streaming wagon to that gigantic, sales engine? So that's Peacock. It has a little smattering of different things. Sports, they've started to do more originals. They got the WWE network. They're interesting kind of I would call it like a hybrid service. And then HBO Max was interesting because it was trying to leverage the prestige of HBO, but take it a bit wider. So including things like, sitcoms like Friends and Big Bang Theory, in addition to the prestige fare of HBO, the classic movie catalog of Warner Brothers. So that was like the sort of gold standard of content with HBO, and then a bit more surrounding it. And then Disney Plus was a lot more rigidly dedicated to these 5 major pillars of content: Marvel, Lucasfilm, which is Star Wars, National Geographic, Pixar, and then Disney branded entertainment, which is kind of the heritage of the company. So it was much more laser focused on those 5 pillars. Interestingly, over time, they've started to kind of fuzz that line a little bit, and they're doing things that don't necessarily fit in the traditional buckets of what Disney Plus was created to do. Some people wonder if that's the best way forward, but it is a deviation from their original strategy. But I think it still is one of the more rigorously organized services, where if you really have no interest in Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, you're less likely to subscribe to Disney Plus. They would love for that to change at Disney. So who am I leaving out? We didn't talk about Quibi. That's the other one.
We did not.
Jim, I don't know if you have any.
Tell us about Quibi for those watching who aren't familiar.
So we have these 5 major characters in our story, one of whom is no longer with us. That would be Quibi. They raised about $1.75 billion, which is a gigantic haul for a startup company. Yeah. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who became very well known as one of the kingmakers of Hollywood, co-founder of DreamWorks, longtime head of animation at Disney, and a really important figure in Hollywood history, kind of decided that this was going to be his next act. And so he got Meg Whitman, the former head of Hewlett-Packard and eBay, a very distinguished tech executive, and kind of enlisted her to be the day-to-day CEO of Quibi, which was aiming to be a kind of Netflix of mobile. They felt they could assemble a kind of higher grade of streaming fare that would be broken down into quick bites, or Quibi for short. And they would just basically super serve that audience that is, waiting online at the bank. They're catching a bus. They have maybe a few minutes in the break room at their job, and they want to catch not a 30-minute or hour-long episode, but they might want to just watch a 6 to 8 minute little, mini episode. And so that was the premise of Quibi. You could quibble with it. You could quibble with Quibi, but the ultimate use case that they envisioned, which was people on the go, obviously came to a crashing halt when they launched in April of 2020, same time as your show. Kind of ironic, but
What do you think went wrong?
You did a lot better than Quibi, Jim.
700 plus episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
TV series, 10 years to do 500.
You know, everybody, and of course, they love to point fingers at the pandemic. And Dawn, I'll turn it over to you because you did an awful lot of reporting on Quibi over time.
Did you think it was a good idea? Do you think it was something that had promise?
So short form video definitely has promise. Look at TikTok and its wildfire popularity, or Snapchat is another example. It feels at the end of the day to have been a classic misreading of what the audience wanted. Jeffrey Katzenberg, whose entire rather storied career has been in the worlds of film and traditional film and television, thought that the white space, the opportunity in the market, was creating these professionally produced movies and TV shows, but delivered in small chapters. He liked to cite Dan Brown's book, as an illustration, as his model. It was 500 chapters, all 5 pages long. So I'm getting the numbers slightly off, but that was the template. And the audience couldn't care less. The audience didn't need to, watch TV shows broken up in little bits. What they were gravitating toward was sort of the authentic, original, sort of fresh takes that TikTok was providing, and which was an exemplar of kind of meme culture. So someone would perform a dance and other people would replicate it, or there would be other like short videos that people would mirror and expand on. It would be kind of a constant conversation with the audience. There was none of that on Quibi, so it just sort of missed its audience. And it wasn't as if other producers, who were working on Quibi to create content, failed to recognize this. It was just that Jeffrey Katzenberg had made a decision that he was going to lead with what worked in Hollywood. Sign up the biggest stars and have them front projects, and the audience will come. And the audience just didn't. And there were some technical limitations as well. So as Dade mentioned, the service launched right at the height of the pandemic in the first wave, a month after we were all locked down. And Quibi made the calculation. People are dying for fresh content. Maybe we can lighten the load. But the content was locked on the smallest screen in the home. It was locked on the phone. You couldn't send it to the television. Something they fixed, but it was really an inhibiting factor.
And I just would want to add a quick thing just to kind of highlight one sort of reality that is really unique about the streaming explosion that we document in this book. If you think about the history of entertainment and media, in our case, each of these streaming services, and I think you and your viewers probably have experienced this. I certainly have. There's no template that's universal. Each streaming service has its own search function, its own navigation, its own way of organizing content. That is very different from the explosion of cable television, even really in some ways the early internet, which had certain paradigms of like the way chat rooms or the way walled gardens were created. I mean, Dawn, I don't know, you may have a thought or two on that, but I haven't studied it in detail. I know that's more of your forte, but it is remarkable that the motion picture screen is pretty much the same size. Whatever studio is going to make what's on that screen, they're going to make their mark with the story, with the actors, with the concept. They're not going to change the size of the screen or the way you walk into the theater. But in the streaming era, there's almost like this personality mix that we were really interested in, I think, trying to capture in this book. And it still hasn't kind of settled, but in my mind, that's kind of been a bit of congestion. It's just, there's no channel surfing. There's no easy sliding down the dial, the radio dial. Think of like how that works, right? I mean, we're not in that kind of paradigm anymore. And it's really a fascinating, it remains to be seen whether it flattens out into something where everything kind of looks more or less alike. It's starting to bit by bit, maybe, but that's just an interesting thing I wanted to highlight.
It's fascinating. Yeah. It's kind of a little bit like VHF television versus UHF. UHF was boosted when cable TV came along, because they
Yes.
would take the UHF channels and put channel 31 or whatever it is on 4. So you
Yes.
could, to the average person, they think they're watching 4, but it's really 31, but it would give them more access. It's really fascinating when you look at all of it. Do you see a battle that's happening not just amongst the individual services for supremacy, as newspapers have done and business does, the TV networks, the radio stations, and just business, everybody wants to be number one, most watched. So everybody spends their money with that one, whatever company it is, department stores, supermarkets, they want to be number one. Do you see that, where it's the play is those streaming services are battling for that number one supremacy status? Or is it also the industries themselves, meaning the television world versus streaming? Like, I remember in the beginning when streaming first started, even like YouTube and others, I remember people sort of writing it off. Oh, well, this is television. This is the network. These are stations. We have towers. We have news helicopters and studios and hundreds of people and decades of excellence and awards, Emmys, and all that. What is this? What's this YouTube thing? What are the? That's just child's play. Go have fun, but we're here. I remember sort of that happening a little bit, that rivalry between, and then now as all of these things have risen, like the YouTubes and everything else, YouTube now has YouTube TV, everybody's sort of saying, well, maybe we need to get in on the game a little bit. So are there a couple of things, basically what I'm trying to say, happening all at the same time? The streaming services are competing with one another, but also the industry is competing within itself. The TV world, the traditional broadcast way of doing things, the streaming way, digital way of doing things. Is that all happening all at the same time? And the consumers in the middle saying, what? I just want to watch something.
I think there is no question that there is a battle for supremacy and for subscribers with between Netflix and its peers. Let's be plain. Netflix is still much larger than all of its rivals at 220 million subscribers. There's no one even close to that number. So Hollywood gave it a decade head start. So it is, leads its rivals, not only in terms of subscribers domestically, but also it has production entities all around the world. So it has a first mover advantage, if you will, on its competitors. Although its rivals have the benefit of 100 years of experience in movie making and making TV shows, and so now it comes down to not necessarily the technology of delivering a streaming service, but what entertainment has always been about, and who has the most entertaining shows, who has the buzziest show right now. For the moment, it is Stranger Things on Netflix, which is surpassing even Disney's much anticipated Obi-Wan series on Disney Plus. So it all comes down to battle for our attention, and these streaming services aren't competing with one another. They're competing with the broader world for our attention. They're competing with social media. They're competing with games. They're competing with simply going out into the world and watching going to a baseball game, say, or going to the shore. So there's definitely this streaming competition happening, but there's also a battle for the platforms. Dave, did you want to talk about the smart TVs vying for our attention?
You're muted there, Dave. There you go.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Don't talk.
Yeah, no, it's really gotten interesting with smart TV and the way we connect with streaming, because it's really that next level of battle. We all remember the cable companies, and you'd have to schedule your 4-hour window when you get either connected or disconnected. Now it's as easy as just unpacking a smart TV, setting it up, and getting logged in to various streaming services. But there's a real battle in that world, for shelf space, for positioning. I mean, it gets pretty we were sort of trying to reckon with that as we were writing this book, and it was like, a whole 3D chess situation that, we ended up including a little bit of it, but it is the next kind of battleground that's going to be going on.
It's not just really, not just how we watch, but also what we're watching that has been altered as well to a degree, right?
Right.
Tell us about
That's
that.
right.
Do you want to start, Dade, or
maybe you can start?
No, I agree with you. So streaming has broken down a lot of the barriers in the sorts of content that consumers are willing to watch. Netflix demonstrated, for example, that American consumers were perfectly happy to sit down and watch a television show or a movie that originated somewhere else in the world, and were willing to either listen to that content dubbed or read subtitles. And it capitalized on it. What it discovered is a series like Lupin, which is this sort of kind of detective thriller out of France, was just as compelling in the U.S. as it was in France. Or Money Heist, Casa de Papel, was a Spanish series, but it traveled in the English-speaking world just as well. And more recently, Squid Game, the rather interesting drama out of South Korea, was a global phenomenon. And so I think that really has broadened the aperture of what consumers are, the sorts of things that we find entertaining, and our willingness to go out from their comfort zone beyond sort of primetime broadcast TV, which had a certain sensibility, kind of inoffensive sensibility. I think that consumers are willing to indulge more broadly, and I think streaming has made all that possible. And now every other streaming rival is similarly supporting locally produced content from all around the world. The Walt Disney Company has 300 productions currently in various stages all around the globe that will magnify, will augment what is already those very well-known global brands that are already on its service. So I think that our tastes are evolving, and as streaming has opened us up, much as sort of in an earlier time, streaming services gave us all access to independent film, which or documentaries, which weren't broadly distributed. So I think that our tastes are changing because we have access to more information, more types of content.
Congratulations on all this too, because the critical acclaim and praise from readers and those even within the industry, from peers, has been extraordinary, and it continues to pour in as people delve in deep. Kudos to you guys for doing that. I know within the book there are some momentous and disruptive battles for the streaming supremacy among the giants. Are there any like little maybe teaser nuggets or something that you might be able to share from a chapter of the book for our viewers?
Oh boy, how do we whittle it down to just one? I mean, there was really a remarkable interview that we got a chance to do with Kevin Mayer, who was at the time running. He was really the architect of Disney's dramatic leap into streaming. He kind of oversaw the creation of Disney Plus. He's a really hard-charging, but also very thoughtful executive there at Disney. And now he's moved on since 2020. He's running a whole different company now. But at the time, he was the ultimate kind of company man, leading the charge. And we got a chance to talk to him about, but he was not CEO of the company, which at the time was Bob Iger. So in November of 2019, Disney Plus, after a great deal of fanfare, they announced they had The Mandalorian as their big launch show, and they had fans, really excited, and a lot of sort of pre-sales of subscriptions, but we didn't know how many. And so then day one, they throw the switch, and as we got a chance to talk to Kevin about a little later, chaos, ensued, and they basically were overloaded with demand. And so eventually, when the dust settled, it was 10 million people had signed up on day one, a remarkable flood of interest, which is great. Yeah. But Kevin was telling us about finally going to bed to like snag a couple of hours of shut eye, in the wee hours, And a couple of hours later, 5 a.m. or so, this stream of text, maybe Dawn, you can take us from there, but his phone lights up and it's like this emergency moment when the whole thing had basically shut, and, kind of gone into overload. And when you went to subscribe, you were getting an error message and it was just a debacle.
Yeah, it crashed, and there was message after message on his phone from the CEO, Bob Iger, Bob Iger, Bob Iger, Bob Iger, which is the classic "oh shit" moment. And it was something. What's intriguing is Disney had been doing what technologists refer to as load testing, the technology that undergirds Disney Plus was actually developed by Major League Baseball, and so it had been and it had previously served as a platform for HBO and Game of Thrones. So it was used to volume, but not this sort of volume. And what we learned in our interview with Kevin Mayer was that there was a problem with the logon. Disney had been requiring people to use their one universal logon that perhaps they'd used at the parks or used in the stores, so that Disney could kind of keep track of its consumer. And so this reasonable desire to keep track of its consumers as they journeyed, as they devoured various parts of the streaming content, actually ended up being a tremendous bottleneck.
I think your viewers should keep that in mind when they're hearing these reports. Like there was a report today of robots that are supposed to go around Disney World with your belongings. Did you see this, Jim? This was just out today. I don't know. I'm just saying they have a little history. No, they to their credit, they actually got their act together, and Disney Plus, as we've been saying, they quickly shored up the issues. And
what about those who do have, I guess we all come across folks who have the concern about everything being merged to one thing. And the more that we, I guess, subscribe to, and the more passwords we have, and the more of everything that's going up somewhere to a server or a cloud or what have you, the less control we have of our own lives, or, everybody's going to figure out every little thing about our lives, and they're fearful of getting involved in some of these things because of that. I mean, they might like what it is, but they don't want to hop in because you have to give so much information about who you are and what you're about in order to subscribe and partake in some of the things. You went to the movies, got the ticket, got the popcorn, put on TV. Nobody asked any questions. You just watch TV, put the radio on. But with some of these, there's other things that are asked. And have you come across people who just like the little resistance to that, maybe old school or whatever it may be?
For sure. A couple of thoughts, and then Dawn, if you have anything on your end, I'm sure you do. But Netflix is adding advertising. And the surprising thing about that is that Reed Hastings, the co-founder and co-CEO, for years disdained advertising and said that it was, by not having it, Netflix would avoid the privacy issues and the sensitivities around consumer data that were clearly being expressed in many other corners of the industry. So he was trying to differentiate Netflix from every other company. Now he's right there in the soup. And to your point, there's going to be some, I think, hesitation among some subscribers or some would-be subscribers about, hey, what is Netflix going to be doing with my data? The other thing I did want to, I guess, flag was that Dawn had mentioned smart TVs. You have a lot of big smart TV providers and partners who have been actually fined by government regulators because they were basically not allowing consumers an appropriate opportunity to opt out. You're supposed to say, like, hey, Jim Masters, you're my new consumer. Are you going to allow us to track you? And then if you say sure, then we will track you. If you say no, you're supposed to not track. But these were companies that were blatantly disregarding that.
Still tracking.
And were fined for those transgressions. So it's an interesting area, Dawn. I don't know if you have other thoughts, but.
There you go.
Forgive me. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
This whole notion of the smart TVs watching you while you're watching it is a little unsettling, and it persists to this day. The glass knows exactly what you're watching and for how long. And that information is being aggregated and sold to advertisers. Not only does the TV know what you're watching, but it knows exactly what zip code you're in, and there's the opportunity to to marry that information with demographic information and with the net worth of the community, and have a really specific portrait of me in my living room, and in what sorts of advertising I might be interested in seeing.
Yeah, and
But
I haven't seen a lot of attention. Just one other thought occurred to me, Dawn, is that we haven't seen it yet, but Disney Plus is adding advertising, and we all know that that is a very treacherous area. They may insist 9 ways to Sunday that they have all kinds of technologies, safeguards in place, but when you're talking about a young audience, watching, Little Einsteins or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse or Doc McStuffins, and they get the wrong ad in front of them.
well, do they have to be? Do they have to be COPPA compliant? Right, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act
Right.
has some very specific regulations about advertising to children. Is a streaming service
Yes.
more like the internet, or is it more like the TV? And we'll find out.
Yes. Well, it's true. Like even when
tuned.
we do these episodes of our series, we have to have an agreement with YouTube as to whether or not these episodes are made for kids or not.
Sure.
And you have to designate that. And then, of course, you have social media, and Facebook rolls out ads. Everybody everywhere is rolling out all these different ads now that are bombarding us about this, that, and the other thing. It's sort of like, I would imagine the two of you are probably subscribed to everything because you have to be to stay plugged in.
It's true.
I mean, it's important to note the benchmark in answering that question. I think we're north of 300 separate subscription video on demand services in the US, which is kind of breathtaking. So the answer is I'm not subscribed to all of them, but many of them. I mean, I've become a resource now for friends of mine now that they know about this book.
They know you have the.
You can help me figure it out. How do I subscribe to? If I want to watch Walking Dead, can I subscribe through AMC Plus and get it at the same time?
Welcome to my world, Dade.
Yes,
I had a day once where we had the radio on, the TV was on, the phone was ringing, the laptop was on, the PC was going, and it was such, working in the industry too. And it actually, for that one day, was such an overwhelm, a feeling that I had to be plugged into every single thing and addressing and responding to all these things all at the same time. I said, we're shutting it all off and we're going out to the ocean. I gotta actually shut all this, even though I love it, I have to shut it off.
Good thing you're near the beach, that's the ticket, right?
Well, I felt like I was supposed to be learning how to sew a button and climbing Mount Everest, and I'm supposed to be swimming with dolphins, and I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm supposed to be doing that, and they're telling me all these things. I'm supposed to be an expert in this and expert. And I'm like, we're going to the ocean and going to dive in it. It's
Good
like
call.
You can't do everything 24/7. It really is fascinating. What are some things that you collectively, individually learned about the industry, about the process, about all of this that maybe surprised you as you were doing your research, as you were doing your investigative work and your interviews, maybe that you sort of thought already, or maybe just disappointed you or surprised you or whatever, just in relation to doing the work and immersing yourself in this process as you were writing the book?
I would start with one interesting thing. I've been covering the media business for many, many years. And so there's a kind of baked in expectation that it's all about growth. Forget about what you did a year ago, last quarter. It's all about, can you grow the next quarter, the quarter after that? So everybody's compensation, each executive at a certain level of a company is tied to that growth. So you grow X amount, you get Y as a bonus from that. So what really surprised me, though, even as well as I understood that, it surprised me the degree to which innovation or the lack thereof, and the kind of suspended animation of like companies that couldn't decide whether they wanted to go into streaming, and if they did, what did it look like, was kind of bound up in this idea of compensation and individual, really like self-interest, that unlike tech companies are far from my ideal, or the pure, the purest of entities. We know that. But it is interesting that competitively they were at an advantage, because the whole model of compensation is very different. The premise is very different. The equity interest is different. So, for a company that's been in business for decades, doing one form of media, for them to suddenly change their stripes and try to be a tech company is a lot harder than it looks. And I was surprised how important that compensation piece is to the overall picture.
How about you, Dawn? What are some things you learned along the way, maybe surprised you about it all?
Like, I agree with Dade. The degree to which decisions were made, both based on executive compensation packages, which were calculated based upon publicly traded companies hitting certain performance benchmarks, that really kept executives who could see the trend evolving, who could see shifting consumer behavior, reluctant to jump into to embrace streaming, because it really did undercut compensation. So that I agree with Dave that was jarring. I was also struck by the number of times executives within these giant media companies not only saw what was coming, but proposed buying Netflix. It seemed as though everyone had considered buying Netflix at one point or another. Those voices in the wilderness were sort of tamped down, because again, the old business model was very, very lucrative. It is, as Dade knows, and as you know as well, Jim, it's the definition of the innovator's dilemma. The future is crystal clear, and yet the old business is the one that's generating the money. So it's this difficult process of trying to navigate from the old world to the new. That was sort of the heart of our book. So that was why that was what I found intriguing as well.
Incredible. I tell you, it really is fantastic. And this is such a great conversation. I tell you, who is the book designed for? I mean, folks like me, I soak it all up. People in the industry soak it all up. Who do you individually, before we wrap, see the book designed for? Or is it for anybody, a casual reader who's trying to figure it all out as well? What would you say, Dave?
We definitely think it has an appeal for a business-minded reader. I mean, I think if you're truly disconnected from the world of business, or you have no interest in kind of the inner workings of corporations or corporate life, maybe it's not the most natural thing for you to read. But if you have any curiosity about, the structures of these companies, which, at the end of the day, when you sit on your couch and you're surveying the streaming options on your screen, it's all about these organizations that are, behind the scenes. So I think it's a business inclined reader. I mean, we like to sort of constantly ask ourselves through the writing process and in developing it, would somebody who's, in the pharmaceuticals business, benefit from understanding the cautionary tale of Quibi, or the remarkable rise and the disruption of Netflix, and its journey. And we ultimately wanted to ground the narrative in that sensibility, that it wouldn't be too inside. You're exactly right. I think people who are already sort of in the pocket, if you will, who are either working in the industry or they have just an innate curiosity, will be drawn to it. But we did want to make it coherent and, accessible to a broader group that was just maybe trying to understand the, like I pick up a lot of books about, there's a book that just came out about Jack Welch. And even though he did have a small role overseeing NBC, obviously, as we know, it was much more interesting about how he ran GE, how he ran factories and drove certain business innovations. And it's not that I'm an MBA, but I just find that stuff kind of fascinating. So we were trying to do something similar with these mythical figures
Yeah.
who we're seeing streaming.
People like William S. Paley from CBS and Roone
Sure.
Arledge from ABC, and right, these innovators and creators. How about you, Dawn?
Well, Dade and I had a very similar target. The through line in our book is this notion of navigating change, and sort of the and how fraught it can be. For anyone who's going through a transition knows that these decisions are fraught with tension and disagreements, and so we wanted to really bring to light for anyone who's curious about how these behemoths navigated change and what the future might hold. We thought we would intrigue people who perhaps wanted to get a little bit behind the scenes and gain some insights into how these giant companies got themselves to pointed toward the future.
It's really cool. Our special guest, Dade Hayes, is specialized in entertainment business coverage for the better part of 2 decades as a writer and editor of Deadline, Variety, Entertainment Weekly. And at Deadline, he writes about a range of financial and corporate news, along with streaming, film, television, technology, and advertising. He's written 2 previous books, as he mentioned, contributed original scripts to top-rated podcast series Business Wars, and his writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and the Globe and Mail, and he's appeared regularly on media outlets like Marketplace, the BBC, CNN, and now the Jim Masters Show Live. And Dawn is a Los Angeles-based U.S. entertainment business correspondent for Reuters. She previously held reporting and editing positions at Forbes, Los Angeles Times, and Recode, writing about the companies and people behind the biggest disruption in entertainment since cable TV, streaming video. And she has spent more than 20 years covering the intersection of entertainment and technology. Her work has appeared in some of the nation's most prominent publications, including USA Today, U.S. News and World Report, and Los Angeles Times, and as a senior editor at Recode, she won awards for her coverage of the devastating cyber attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment. Before you guys slide off, I really appreciate all the time you spent with us. Mr. George Burns is here, and he just wanted to say that you guys knocked it out of the park, and he thoroughly enjoyed. And he's a streaming subscriber himself up above, but he usually pops in towards the latter part of the episodes of our show. My aunt collected dolls, and when he turned 100, she collected this. It got passed down to me. He pops in with a cigar, his hanky, and he said, "You guys are absolutely amazing." And he learned a lot. This was all new to him.
I am not
white and
I am not kidding, Jim. The diaspora of streaming has grown to the point that I am fairly confident there is a George Burns channel somewhere. If it doesn't exist now, you should create it.
We should create it as
Getting
well.
sliced and diced like that.
That's it. You guys are fantastic. Where can people get the book? Amazon, all the usual.
It's in an array of different outlets. You can go to bingetimesbook.com, and there's a buy the book button. It'll give you options if you don't want to use the aforementioned superstore online, which we have nothing against. But if people want to buy it other ways, it's in major booksellers and on Audible, as you're showing right there.
Which is also Amazon, but whatever.
Who's counting?
Not an option. It's all Amazon. Yes.
The whole thing is Amazon.
We're going to announce tonight that the Jim Master Show has been acquired by Amazon. I'm very excited.
Thank you very much. George and I are going to pack.
I'm breaking the news.
Right here live. Dade, you're the best. Thank you so very much for spending this amount of time with us.
So
Dawn, you as well. Let's stay in touch. I think what you do is fantastic, and the way you just dig in deep like this, and you present it, in ways that people can digest it and understand. These market moves that are happening in society and in our industries. So continued blessings and joy to you both. Good luck with the book, and you're welcome back anytime. We'll keep the porch light on for you both.
Thank you so much, Jim. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Very kind. Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. You take care. Cheers. Bye-bye now. We appreciate them both. They spent a good amount of time with us here on the show, and we thank them for joining us, and we thank you guys for being with us as well live. Again, if you would like to get the book, it is really fascinating reading, and you don't really have to necessarily be, in the industry, because I'm looking at the numbers, the people that have been watching since we started the show live, this episode. And a lot of you have been with us and you've been commenting throughout. And I think you've been learning something, because a lot of you have been talking about how you enjoy streaming, how you subscribe to this service or you subscribe to that service. And I think that's kind of cool and fascinating. Maybe you got a chance, as you do here on our show, as much as we have entertainment, we have poignant conversations, we have all kinds of ways to learn, about life and really everything that's happening. Again, as I mentioned, it's also available on Audible, which is really, really cool for those of you who ask about that all the time. And there it is, inside Hollywood's furious billion-dollar battle to take down Netflix. There's a lot of competition going on. There's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes, because, a lot of it's still all new. A lot of these streaming services that you see, like Netflix, Paramount, and Apple TV and Disney Plus and all the rest, it's all new stuff. So it's really fascinating. And because, again, it's a part of society too. As much as some of it is sort of business vernacular, it's still part of our society, our culture, the way we do things. We talked about movie theaters, we talked about radio, we talked about newspapers, television, magazines, print, and now streaming as well. And that's what we're doing here right now. We're streaming to the world on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. In the daytime, I work in television and radio, traditional broadcast media. And then here in the evenings, we're streaming like a TV show, but we're streaming to all of you. So we are very plugged in here, and we love it. Hope you guys learned something. And again, it was a fascinating topic. And as I mentioned, they both have extraordinary journalistic backgrounds. And it was really an honor to have Dade and Dawn with us here on the show. Again, you can go to Amazon, you can get the book, Binge Times, and really, really fascinating. And again, you'll probably see all their other work, that is quite prolific as well. And I learned something, I work in these industries, and I learned something myself with this episode. Hey, gang, look who's with us tomorrow. We're going to have some fun. John Coons is with us. Yes, actor. We couldn't even fit everything on the screen. Actor, singer, ventriloquist, magician, entertainer, audiobook narrator, publisher. He does it all. We couldn't even fit it all in our JMS graphic because he does so much. He's going to entertain us. He's going to have a good time with us tomorrow. We look forward to that. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. And then look who's with us on Thursday. We have some real, in addition to John, we have some extraordinary people who are stopping by Lovety Hall here. We have legendary Arnell Carmichael, R&B funk music legend. He is the lead singer and guitarist for the legendary Radio. And we are very honored to have him here. Their songs, their music. Ghostbusters. That's just one thing that they were involved in. We'll save the rest for when he's here tomorrow. But it's incredible the years of music that he's been responsible for, he and the rest of the gang with Radio. And we're really excited to have Arnell here. And we're going to have some music and great conversation. And of course, you guys interacting with us as well, as we have R&B and funk music legend, lead singer and guitarist from Radio, Arnell Carmichael, with us tomorrow. And then look who's with us on Friday. Remember the beloved TV series Three's Company with John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt and Suzanne Summers. And Richard Klein, who played Larry, the neighbor Larry. the Playboy neighbor, Larry, Larry Dallas. Well, not only is Richard, of course, a wonderful actor and has been in many TV shows, many series and films and stage productions, he also is a wonderful director, and he is an acting teacher in New York. And he has all kinds of workshops and students, and we're going to talk to him about a lot of different things. His incredible career in television and in film and stage. His role is Larry Dallas on Three's Company with that whole gang you see on the screen there, and so much more. We're really honored to have him with us on Friday. He is a television legend from Three's Company. Richard Klein is going to be with us on Friday, which is really exciting. And that's just the short list. That is just the short list. Really cool stuff. We love it. We love it. We love it. And good stuff. So, gang, we're going to get ready to wrap up on this particular episode. This episode was something a little bit different than and we really appreciate you guys being with us. And we also appreciate Dade and Dawn being with us as well. Again, here's the book in Audible form. And there is the book as well. As what it looks like, Inside Hollywood's Furious Billion-Dollar Battle to Take Down Netflix. And good stuff. Thanks for being with us, gang. You guys are the best. Stay tuned for all these great guests coming up. Linda Odell's birthday, one of our faithful, lovely viewers. Happy birthday to Linda from me and all of us here at the Jim Masters Show Live. Maybe we'll do a little singing over the weekend or something, but we wish you the very best to Linda and anybody else that is celebrating a birthday. We wish you all the best. And George Burns here with a cigar in his hanky. We toast Linda and we toast all of you. Thanks for being with us, gang. You're always welcome here. And again, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you like what we're doing, all these episodes, over 700 now, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Click the notification bell so you never miss anything. Every show is something unique, different, special, and a lot of fun. And if you enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes that we do, make sure you give us a hearty thumbs up, like. And leave a comment on the YouTube channel as well. Thanks for being with us, gang. We don't say goodbye. We say see you later. We say slancha. We say hasta la vista. We say cheers and sayonara and moi loop and shalom and all the rest. It's always cool when you're here, and thanks for being with us. And we appreciate all the comments. And Linda says, I enjoyed this. Jim, thank you so much. You are very, very welcome, and everybody else watching as well. All right, gang, we're going to scoot out. We'll be back tomorrow. We hope you're here as well. And for those of you watching live, back tomorrow. For those of you who are watching Memorex in the archives later on, we thank you for being with us as well. Take care. Be well. Love one another. Take care of one another. We'll see you on the next episode of the Jim Masters Show Live. Take care. Cheers.